Thank you for checking out this video. Just a quick reminder to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow the channel and put out better videos. Thank you. Welcome to Into the West, a Middle-earth SBG podcast where we discuss the competitive side of the game. My name is Charles. With me today are Richard and Ian. Welcome to another tier list video. This time we'll be tiering the War in Rohan supplement, the 8 legendary legions from this supplement. So if you guys are ready, let's dive right into the first one and see how these 8 legendary legions rank. Just to go over the tiers, we have at the really top S tier, which are tournament winning legendary legions. A tier, which are very competitive legendary legions. B, I would say, is an army that's viable and can win some games, but not necessarily like an optimized list. C is not a super competitive list at all. It's more of either a fun or a narrative-driven sort of legendary legion. And meme tier is an army that doesn't really work and is not that playable.
It's a meme.
Yeah.
That's all there needs to be said.
So what do we have first?
Okay, so the first legendary legion in this book is the Defenders of Helm's Deep. So what are your guys' experiences with this legendary legion?
This is going to shock you guys, but I've never actually played with this legion. I have wanted to since it came out, and I don't think I've gotten a single game with it, and I don't know if I've gotten a game against it either. It looks like a lot of fun, though, and I do want to play it, but I keep getting distracted by other things. My impression is an A, just off of what I've seen, but I don't know.
I've actually played against this, and I don't feel like it's a bad legion, but I'm surprised in how little we see it. So I'm wondering, if there's other regional metas that, have this featured a lot more. But yeah, we don't see this around too much.
It did have a good run when it first came out, right?
Yeah, when it came out, I remember hearing that a few people in the UK won small tournaments with it, and that it was also in the US, it was pretty popular for like the first few months. And then after COVID, I haven't really heard much about it. I've played it a few times, but I wouldn't say that they were played necessarily by people who were there to win the tournament. So when it comes to the list itself, I think there are some pretty solid choices for heroes in there. Like mid-tier, very cheap heroic strike, and obviously it's a Lothlorien and Rohan alliance where you have lots of access to bows that have an increased range and lots of fight 5. So I do think that this list is great, especially at mid points and maybe low points, because you have great access to decent heroes that are under 100 points. I haven't seen it played at like 800, so I don't know if it scales all that well when you go up higher. But I do still think that it has competitive viability. So I don't know if I agree with Ian on an A. I would actually lean more towards a B, but that's mostly because I have never played against this legion where I've found that it had like that punch to it at higher points. I think that there's a certain points level where it's good at, but then it doesn't really scale.
I think I kind of got to disagree with your reasoning here. Because to me, I think it actually does scale pretty well just because of the number of named heroes. and the synergy is pretty good. So I think, when you go the Rohan heroes at low points at 700-800, you can start going into the 3 hunters. So I think that could be pretty strong, especially with Aragorn and Haleth combining. But I think I do agree with your rating, though, that it's not super competitive, the few times that I've played against it. And I think because it seems like the main special rule that you get by forming this legion is just giving your bows a little bit more range. And I know that's pretty solid, especially given you have elf bows, but you're giving up a lot of things. Like all your heroes are on foot, and you know how we feel about foot heroes. Well, maybe not Ian, but but how I feel about foot heroes. I won't speak for anyone else. But yeah, so I think because of that, and especially with with a competitive meta now focusing on like mobility and how important that is for these certain scenarios, you don't always get the chance to just sit back and shoot for like 4 or 5 turns. So that extra 6 inches, so a lot of times it doesn't even matter, So I would also probably give this a B, but probably, I think if you really, really min-maxed, then I think it could be like a bottom tier A-list.
I would support a bottom tier A-list. Nerf.
You don't get enough Rohan heroes in it to make that much of a difference anyway, though. Like most of the time, I think you're getting Gamling and Théodred, and maybe like one or two of the smaller ones, and then you're going into the 3 hunters or Haldir. So
I don't
know if the Gamling nerf hits it that hard.
I mean, even if you just have those 2, that's half the might that you used to get, right?
Well,
you're only getting 1 down instead of 2.
I mean, assuming you're going to burn both of their might really quickly, but like they're not heroic combating, right? Théoden's just sitting there maybe trying to fight one guy a turn.
The strength of this list is being able to spam out decent quality troops. Like at 500 or 600, you could get like in the 30s, which is pretty good for a good side army like this. So
yeah, I think honestly the best thing about this list, first, like that I think is it's another list where you can actually have the 3 hunters leading troops, which is basically like impossible to do in like a normal alliance, and the only other way to do it is like with the ghosts or Men of the West, and this one's actually good compared to Men of the West. So there you go.
Okay, so are we saying a B or an A? It's kind of in between, but what are we landing on here?
I'd be good with like the bottom of A if something else ends up in A, which I think something other things will, but we'll see.
Well, I think since the 2 of us voted B, I think it should be B for now. I mean, we can always make modifications later.
Okay, well, Ian's going to love this next one. Théodred's Guard. Okay, I'll let you have the floor first.
Meme tier, because Théodred is so jazzed about protecting himself, he auto-passes all courage tests, and that's stupid and funny. But in seriousness, I think it's probably S in like 600 and below. Above 600, it probably drops to like an A. Like it's still pretty good, but it has like the weaknesses it has are like much easier to exploit at higher points. That being said, like I don't have like a very big experience with playing at higher points though. Like I think I've only played like that one warm-up game with you, Richard. So like that's not a great sample size, but 600 and below, like I've had a lot of good success with it. So yeah, I think it does a lot.
I can see this being S tier at low points and even mid points. But what's concerning to me are your choice of heroes in the list. Théodred is a pretty decent hitter, but he is a little bit fragile and he has to be your leader. And I think arguably your only other really good hero pick is Helm. I know that some people like Grimbold, but personally it's like he's a little bit of a hit or miss. And I just think after you take those two heroes, the list is just kind of like okay. I mean, the bodyguard is really nice, and I think that scales well. But
on that, Charles, we agree. I think that's why I like it at low points, because that's when you're getting the named heroes, and then after that, it's just more of the same, and that's that. Yeah.
And you know what? I'll say that this is probably one of the most under the radar S tier low points legions. I don't see a lot of people talking about it online, but I 100% agree with you guys that it's crazy strong. Like, it's probably one of the scariest legendary legions at low points. And it hasn't, and maybe it's a good thing it hasn't been talked about a lot, because there hasn't been an FAQ about it compared to like the Rangers of Ithilien or other legions like that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, is like it's the reason it's so good at low points is just because you pack in so much shooting. So, and a lot of lists do that, but it does it in the unconventional way where it's like mostly throwing spears rather than like the bows doing the work. So I don't know if it ever would get FAQ. I'm not sure it needs to be. I think it's kind of where it is, but I will agree. Yeah, it is really strong, like we said, at low points, to the point where like if you show up against like an opponent, you have 20 throwing spears at 400 points, like they might not have the greatest time.
But theme though. But so I think we're all kind of on the same wavelength here. I personally would say if it's S tier in low points and maybe like a B tier for like 800 points, that's kind of our benchmark for high points, then we can average it out to like an A, if you guys are good with that.
I'm good with that, as long as nothing else ends up above it on this list.
Whoa,
nope.
Spoilers.
No promises. All right, so the next one, we have Riders of Éomer. Ian, I don't know if this was the one that you were talking about that was going to be S tier. So I think I've seen it taken mostly because of people wanting to try it for its special rules. So the one I'm thinking is the one turn a game shade rule. And I think I've seen some people try to cheese that by taking like hero heavy version of this list and trying to use that one turn of momentum to try to win. I don't know if I've seen a tournament being won with that strategy, but it sounds like meme tier list to me when people are taking it to cheese. But like, do you guys see any viability in here? I don't think there are enough options. Your warriors are all fight 3. You don't have access to roll guard, and Gandalf is typically already a very hard hero to make your points back with, and with him in a all mounted list, I think that just makes it even harder to get his value.
That is exactly what I was just gonna say. Like, yeah, I think if it had access to fight 4 troops, it'd probably be like, I don't know, somewhere like a B maybe, because you could exploit the -1 bubble a lot more, but getting that only on one turn when all of your troops hitting are strength 3 or fight 3, it's just not enough. It just doesn't hit as hard as it needs to. And like, building it is kind of hard too, because like by the time you pick up Gandalf and Éomer, you're at what, like 350 points, and then trying to get your numbers up, like you're never gonna get Erkenbrand in there unless you're at 800 points, basically. And then at that point, like, it's not, I don't think that's where it plays well.
Yeah, so the only time I've seen this one was actually this year. So, friend of the podcast, host of the Duran show, Mitchell Hammond, he actually took this to one of the tournaments earlier this year. And, he's a competitive player, so I think he wanted to do well. And he does like lists that are a little less popular. Let's just say I've never seen a man with so many regrets, throughout the tournament. Um, yeah, it was really rough. And, even as an experienced player, at a tournament that I felt was maybe slightly, I wouldn't say slightly less competitive, but there were, I think, a lot more newer players too. So it wasn't like a super, super competitive, like flagship kind of tournament that we have. But yeah, I think he had a really tough time winning games, and against armies that might not even have been the most min-maxed and competitive. So I think that kind of shows, even in the hands of an experienced player, it's going to be a uphill battle to win. Then I think there's, that tells the whole story.
Well, the play style of the list is kind of like the opposite of what you expect. Like, you expect this one glorious charge. That's not how you win with this list. You sit back and kite for a long time until your opponent's almost broken. Then you charge in with your one glorious charge, and hopefully by then, with the -1, and you only, and it compensates enough for your fight 3, and you're not charging into like 2 guys backed up by Sears Swords. You're charging into like 1 or 2 guys, and then you can actually make the most of it. But yeah, I don't know.
So would you say, though, I'm giving it the most ideal scenario possible? Like, you're kiting your opponent for the entire game, and it's like a higher points, so you have a lot of bows. Do you feel like if you're trying super hard, to do the best with this list, like it can be like maybe like a C tier, or is it truly that bad where there's just no redeeming qualities?
Yeah, I've only played against it once, and that's exactly what happened. And like I completely underrated it until the guy just like sat there and was kiting me for like most of the game. Like I had my Harad, so he was like getting tons of kills. And I was like, okay, well, maybe there are some merits to this because like I can't shoot back because of your blinding light, so that's good. And then we got into combat, and I had like like the Harad list build that I had a decent amount of fight for, and a lot of like just small heroes, and it just tore the riders apart so fast. I don't know. I think it has some value. Maybe put it at like C or like bottom of C. But like if you're gonna take it, it's probably just meme tier because you're just gonna go and like fuck around basically and just have fun with Gandalf the White and see what he can do.
Yeah, I think at this point, like strength 2 bows, there's only so much kiting you can do, and I'll say like you have limited heroic marches here because with the heroes that you're given, it's not a list that like Riders of Theoden where you have near unlimited might. So there's only so much kiting you could do, I think. Okay, I am good with the meme tier. Maybe it could be the top of meme tier, like the best meme tier Legion.
Now that's a spoiler.
Well, we reviewed Men of the West, so I'll say it's definitely better than that one.
Agreed. Because it's at least playable at high points, maybe. Okay, so next we have Paths of the Druadan. So this one actually is one of the lesser seen Legendary Legions. I've never seen it at a tournament, and played it once in a casual game, and I've played against it maybe once in a casual game. It's kind of similar. Some of the rules and the choices are similar to Rise of Theoden. The difference is you have to take a full warband of Woses with Gonbury Gun. So the reason why I don't think this is like top or bottom, it's kind of middle, is because it has like your core of Rohan heroes with their good profiles, and it has a couple decent special rules. So there's one where you win heroic move roll-offs on a 3+. I think that's pretty good. But on the downside is you have 15 models or 15 Woses in your army at all times that kind of make easy targets, and you're always, at least at lower points or mid points, you're always afraid of breaking early because of that.
I mean, can you not just sit the 15 Woses like in a forest on the board and just have them blowpipe anything that comes near, and that's like all they do?
Yeah, but that's only 12-inch range, right?
Yeah, that's true. Like it's, I don't know. I feel like there's options with this. Like you could use the Woses as bait pretty effectively. Like a bunch of defense 3 models sitting in a gap that looks very, very tempting as a target.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is situations where they would be good. It's kind of situational based on the Woses profile and also the special rules.
And I think it rules this Legion out of like lower points because you don't want like Theoden and then Godbury gone with a full warband of Woses. Like that's like straight meme tier, right? Like so there's no point in running at low points. You're forced into high points. And similar to you, I've actually never played with or against it, but I think looking at the rules, the 3+ heroic move off is nice, but I see potential in the waypoints because you get 3 of these markers that are 6 inches wide of going through any difficult terrain. So I'm just thinking, of course, like, how to game the system and all that, but, there are some boards that are really, really rough. And if you're thinking like cliffs or like near impassable terrain, obviously not impassable because it says difficult terrain, but there's some boards that are like really rough. Like sometimes I've seen like craters or these like cliffs that are really tough to get up. In like a scenario like domination where you're placing down the objectives, or if an objective is placed down naturally on something really difficult, I think it can be really interesting because you have to remember, like, an all-mounted army, like when you play against a Riders of Theoden, how you counter it is try to force them into chokes, try to fight around forests. You don't want to fight them in open field. So I think, it can be kind of cheeky having these 3 objective points or areas you can move through.
Yeah, on most tables, those 3 points that's going to cover all of like the difficult terrain on the table. I think in a lot of situations, or all like the important ones where you're going to be fighting. So that is a good point. Like it is going to do a lot for you. I don't know. It's just hard without having like the experience against it.
So the thing that made me not want to play a second game with them was just the lack of synergy between the Woses and the Rohan. So you're kind of left with a warband of infantry that are fragile, and then you have your cav. So to me, it's like, a portion of your list will either have to be like left behind on objectives, or they're going to march and you're going to have to heroic march just to fight at the same time. I do like the special rules, but I just don't think that the army itself has enough synergy to make it work in like a tournament setting. I'm probably sitting at a C. I don't think it's a terrible list, but I wouldn't choose it if I'm playing competitively.
I'll let Ian be the tiebreaker here. This might be all theory craft, but I would give this a B, maybe closer to the bottom of B, but I think there is potential. But maybe there is a reason we don't see it much, and I haven't really come upon it in a tournament. But I mean, like we said before too in previous podcasts, like there has been a lot of underrated armies that people are slowly trying to go back to. So who knows?
So yeah, I've been kind of sliding back and forth between like C and B. After looking at the special rules again, I mean, I kind of want to cop out and just say it's C normally and B in a good versus evil list. Because like the Wozes get a bunch of bonuses to wound orcs and goblins and Uruk-hai, and then there's a special rule in here that gives it to everybody basically, rerolling ones. But the heroic move roll-off thing is pretty big for a mostly cav army. Like that's really cool and that's really good. And the waypoints are also really good for a I think I put it at B, but like the lowest tier of B. I think it has some good potential. And you're still getting the fight 4, right? Because you're going to take Théoden. So you're getting fight 4 on your Riders of Rohan or fight 5 on the Royal Guard. You could basically build this as a normal Rohan list. You're not going to hit as hard because you don't have the strength 4, but you got the Wozes, and you've got some other really good special rules. So I think that more than makes up for it, actually. And after saying that, I think it might be a lot better than people think it is.
Fair enough. Okay, up next we have Uglúk Scouts. So this one, in contrast, or at least me, I've seen it quite a bit, at least when it first came out. And maybe not locally, but I think I saw it a few times locally. But when I travel for tournaments, I would see them, and at high points as well. So this list is often compared with Lurcha Scouts, which is another Scout Legion. And I think after Lurcha Scout came out, this one kind of faded out a little bit. People kind of prefer that one. But I think this one is actually still a pretty interesting list. So it basically it's an army mix of Uruk-hai Scouts and Orcs. And you're kind of leaning on the animosity rule to get +1 on your 2 wound rolls. And the list is a mix of a few Uruk-hai named heroes, a few Orc named heroes, kind of all medium to lower level heroes. But it's a list that can spam out. Well, what do you guys think? Any competitive viability to this one?
I think there's certainly competitive viability of this one. I don't know if I'd go quite to 600 points. Maybe you could probably do it decently at 600, but I think like 500 is probably where it shines. You just having that many fight 4, strength 4 troops that can move 8 is kind of scary. The tricky part with this is that you don't. The animosity is kind of hard to trigger because your orcs can't keep pace with the Uruk-hai. And I don't think you want to run this as a traditional shield wall list because you're not making the most out of it if you do.
Yeah, that's why I don't like this list, to be honest, because you're rarely going to get the animosity rule. Like on paper, you're like, oh, that's great, but it happens so rarely, especially if you get the Uruk-hai drummer, they just outpace, the orcs so much. And if you do want to keep pace with them, then you're kind of losing out on the reason why you took the faster guy.
Well, okay, sorry, I'm thinking of army of like list building right now. If you are gonna run this, because you can kind of end up spamming out bows like a reasonable amount just because all of your heroes are so cheap. So maybe the way you do it is you do kind of make a bit of a shield wall, but you put your Uruk-hai bows in the front and then some orcs kind of with them at the same space. So and then they're drumming or whatever. So they're going to be moving up at roughly the same pace, like maybe 5.5, 6 inches a turn. And then you have all your shield Uruk-hai running up the flanks trying to go around the sides. And then that way you're kind of getting the animosity in the front while still getting the wrap and the advantage of numbers. I don't know. It's a very specific play style, but there's something there, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it run that way, but that can be a good strategy if you lean in on the Uruk-hai bows and just sacrifice your movement a bit, move up slower. Without the animosity rule, though, this Legion doesn't really seem worth running. Like if you were to give it up.
Yeah.
So
it does get you some really cheeky damage though. Like this.
Yeah,
this could.
accurate.
Yeah. That's the one I was looking at because he's got backstabbers, right?
Yeah, and then if you stacked it with animosity, that's not bad.
That's kind of gross. Or like even any of the Uruk-hai heroes, strength 5 with +1 to wound, or if you dare take an Uruk-hai scout captain with a 2-handed weapon, he's getting +2 at strength 5. That's pretty gross. So like it is gonna hit hard when it does win the fights, and it can trigger those bonuses, but it's setting that up is difficult.
I think I will say though, if you're going by how many points you're getting from the bonuses, getting free marauders, getting the free marauder upgrade is pretty good. You're saving 1 point per marauder. If you can get up to 40 to 50 Uruk-hai, like that's 40, 50 points that you're saving, which I think in comparison to, some army bonuses or some legendary legions, it's on the decent side. It's not the best, but you're getting some value there.
I mean, there's also the woodland creature thing. Everybody gets woodland creature, and that's, half a point per model. That's, I think it's got pretty good legs to stand on.
Okay, but the base Uruk-hai Scout is not points efficient, so you have to use some of that points to make up.
Yeah. Well, but that's the funny thing, though, is they're saying the base Uruk-hai Scout isn't that efficient, and then comparing it to a normal Uruk-hai warrior, it's the same profile, point for point. It's the same profile. So
in this day and age,
I don't know.
In this day and age,
yeah,
it's not
sure.
that good anymore.
Yeah. With gun to bed berserkers running around in hunter orcs, maybe not, but.
Do you guys think that in scenarios where you start closer together, like maybe at halfway, like at the middle line, or if your opponent also deploys close and you're going to fight anyway, like the first turn or the second turn, there's less awkwardness between the orcs and the Uruk-hai? I can see this working. If it's not like a mobility sort of focused mission where you have to run across the map or you have to start apart, I can see this potentially be really good.
No, that's the opposite in my opinion, because then you took all those bows for nothing, and your move 8 doesn't really matter that much. So.
Oh, I wouldn't be doing Ian's list. I wouldn't take max bow.
No.
Well, I don't know. I think it's strength 3 bows. You're gonna get if you get like the 40 or 50 models, you're gonna get a lot of them. I think there's still something there. But even if you do start close, right, you still have all those guys moving 8 around the flank, so you are gonna force like your opponent into a ton of one-on-one fights, and that's kind of like Uruk-hai have a very good base profile, so forcing one-on-one fights isn't the worst thing for them, especially when like the ones that aren't one-on-one fights are hopefully getting +1 to wound, right? That's big.
Yeah. So what are you thinking for the tier list?
I'm so conflicted. Like, I want to put it at B, but I'm looking at the other list we put at B, and I'm like, no, it shouldn't go there. Maybe behind the other ones. I don't know if I'd put it above. I think I'd still put it at B. I don't know if I'd put it above Druadan.
So I see it way more than Druadan, and I don't know if it's because of like the Druadan model's availability, but I kind of want to put it above Druadan, but I know Richard.
I would rather play Druadan, but I will concede maybe same tier. But Ian, which one do you like better here? You're the tiebreaker.
About if it's going on B or C?
No, it's going on B, I think. But
which one's better?
Druadan or Uglúk Scouts?
Put Uglúks at the bottom.
Yes.
I'm just thinking like the Druadan list. Like I said before, you can basically build it like a normal Rohan list with the woes as contingent, and having those extra bonuses is pretty good. So I think that's probably better than this.
Okay, the next one, I don't think we have to have too much disagreement. The Wolves of Isengard. Another list that I think I was very excited when I first saw it. I was like, this has some cool rules, but it just never lived up to the hype.
Never seen it at a tournament, and I think it's textbook meme. Have any of you ever played against it?
So this is like the one list that goes straight to me. Like as soon as you read it, you're like, it's all Warg Riders and only Sharku. It's straight to meme tier. I have played against it though, once before. When I was in Oz, so it was kind of like it was like a theme tournament. So the people in my group, all the evil players had to bring an evil list. So somebody brought this, and it did look pretty intimidating. There's a lot of throwing weapons in there on the charge, lots of like high strength models on the charge, but it just kind of didn't. I don't know, man. Like
when it first came out, it looked interesting. Like at low points, the scout mechanic, maybe in like heirlooms or something, you could get a head start, and or see surprise, you could get a head start, right, in moving your models a little bit. And also the free hero combat, it seems nice, but then you look at it and it's a fight for hero.
No, he's a fight for Elendil. Get it right.
Fight for Elendil. There you go.
300 to 400 points. I think this actually could be a pretty reasonable list, just because you're gonna get so many cav into it that hit kind of hard, and I don't know, the special rules I feel like will play a lot more into it then.
Okay, but, yeah. That's kind of my pitch here. So I know you guys are crapping all over it, but my case for C tier is it's absolute, meme tier for high points, but like you said, for 300 to 400 points, and if you get those scenarios, the ones that, especially the Maelstrom ones, but yeah, like Seize the Prize, Reconnoiter, if you really count them out, I think there's more than you think that I think you would have a pretty big advantage on. And just remember too, you can dismount the Warg Riders, so you can, you're never going to get all the courage tests, but you can potentially double your model count. And at low points, that can be extremely useful at the end of games, for objectives. So I'd like to try it one day, and I'd like to think that there's a shot at victory, so I would like it to say that, it's playable, potentially like even a low B at like 300 points. and that would drag it overall score out of meme tier.
Why do you think you don't see it though?
Because nobody plays 300 or 400 points events. That's why.
Because no one owns that many Warg Riders.
I don't know. Like, I'm looking at the special rules again. It does look fun. It does look good. But, like, that's all you have, right? Like, that's the thing. After the first turn or after priority and whatever you get the special rule moving, you're just stuck with a bunch of Warg Riders. And, like,
they also have access to wargs, so they could really spam out at like 300 points. Like, I don't know how many models you could get, but
I don't know if that's the way you do it. I think you want all the cav because killing models at that low points value is like really good, and the cavalry just kills so much better. Even if you just get a few kills at the start, like you can really snowball.
Yeah, and I mean, getting the shaman too, like essentially you have a big chunk of fearless too, so.
True. So Richard, are you trying to argue a C tier?
I'm trying to argue that, but of course I could easily be outvoted here.
Yeah, there's no chance this is ending up in C tier if Riders of Éomer is in meme tier. There's like no chance. Sorry.
All right. Can we at least put it above Riders of Éomer, or?
I don't think it goes above Riders of Éomer.
All right, guys, Sharku fans, I gave it my best shot.
I appreciate the effort, though, Richard. You gave it a shot, and that's all we can ask for.
All right, so the next one we have here is Assault upon Helm's Deep. I think, as much as Ian wants to argue that Théodred's Guard is the best legion in this book, I think we have a contender here. I brought this to a tournament a few times, and it's gotten nerfed a few times. The demolition charge was toned down, and more recently the ballista was toned down. But I still think it's pretty strong. It's not your typical list. It works. It plays quite different. You don't have a hero with heroic strike. You don't have like a ton of might, but you got great shooting. Very effective siege weapons, and I think it can deal with most things that you come up against in a tournament. The only issue I have is I've tried writing a few lists for midpoint tournaments, and I don't think it works as well. But yeah, definitely really strong at high points.
And I would say it's not bad at low if you take one ballista and no bomb. I think it's all right, and you can spam out still a decent amount of Urukai. I don't know. Personally, maybe it's because it's just we play so many 800 points, but I definitely think it's still S tier, regardless of the FAQ. It's definitely come down a notch, but I think it went from like toxic level to S tier. So it's still very, very good. Like there's no tournament that you want to come up upon and then you roll up to your table and it's like, oh, it's Assault upon Helm's Deep. Like doesn't matter what you brought, you're not going to be happy about it.
Yeah, nobody wants to fight a dozen crossbows and a ballista or more.
Multiple.
Yeah,
ballistas.
like that's like 500 points. That's what you're going to be facing, which is it's not fun. I think it is better at higher points though. Like you want to be able to get I think the ideal build is the double ballista and a bomb, because then your opponent it's just so hard for them to do anything, because the way you counter this at low points is if you have the bigger heroes and you get them into combat, like this list doesn't really have an answer. And if they don't have the double ballista and the bomb to like shut down that hero, it becomes a lot harder for this list to stop them in combat. It's still kind of gross. Like I don't know, maybe A at low points and then S at high points. Like it's still great at 800 though.
I'd argue that the ideal build is triple ballista, but I agree with you. I think it's up there for sure. But personally, I would say, yeah, I'd be okay with S tier or A tier, but I think the other two guys are pretty firm on S tier.
Is it meme tier because you could build a list with only bombs? Bombs and ballistas, that's it.
Still S.
Damn.
Last but not least, we have the Army of Dunland. So this list, when it first came out, it was super cool. Or it looked super cool. You know, I saw lots of armies on Facebook and, you know, events at various communities. I saw Dunland quite a bit. I haven't seen very many podium finishes or people who've won a tournament with this Legion, and I could be wrong. Maybe in your local meta it is very strong, but I just see this list as like only good up to a certain level, and it's mostly limited by just the quality of profiles. You know, we did a Dunland review in the past seasons, and the heroes are very good for like the mid tier, but I think that similar to Théodred's Guard, like once you take those heroes, the list kind of plateaus.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think the regular Rohan warrior with throwing spear, especially in Théodred's Legion where they can use it as spears, it's much better value. So I think my issue is that I don't love the Husk Girl. I mean, it's good, but it's not great. And then the Wild Men of Dunland, okay, especially if you give them like the Fearless, they're nice and cheap, but just none of their warriors, I think, are just, you know, if it was in Convenient Alliance, something you would want to spam out and, you know, take advantage of. So they're all playable, but none of them are. Yeah, but I don't think you're gonna spam the Kerbane, but yeah, I think that's definitely one of the trump cards that this Legion has. And another thing is, I also feel like their special rule really comes down to the 6-inch banners, because the War Cry and then the Hatred rule, like those are again a nice little bonus, but to me, it reminds me a little bit of like Army of Gothmog, like a little bit more conditional.
I mean, it's still a strength 4 list. So strength 4 with +1 wound, even though it's only one turn, it's kind of nasty.
It is a glass cannon list, but I think it also goes against the current meta right now with, you know, a lot of shooting that's going on, and they don't really have anything that can counter that, I think.
They got numbers in Kerbane, man. The Kerbane can shield or just like hit the archers. It has counters, I think, but
I think one thing that keeps this list from being a very good spamming army, because you could argue that, you know, most of the warriors are very cheap and you can spam them. You have Thryden, who's a hero of valor, and then everyone else is a hero of fortitude, and you know it's not easy to spam out like a decent number of models. I think the list that I've tried, I almost brought this Legion to a 500-point tournament, but you know there just wasn't enough warband space when you take Thryden and Gorolf, and it's awkward because you don't want to take a third hero, but you're kind of forced to. And so I think a lot of mid-point situations where you find that this Legion is supposed to be really good, it's actually very hard to write a good list. But then at high points, you don't have answers to a lot of threats. And so I think it's good maybe at like 600 or some point value where you can get like a sweet spot of number of heroes. But then like above and below that is just like, it loses its effectiveness.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot is around 600, 700 points, because that's where you get 4 heroes, maybe 5 if you want to go more hero heavy and like less on the elites like the Cav and the Crebain. But and then you get enough slots that way. And I think it's pretty decent then, because you end up with, you have a lot of might in this list, which you wouldn't really think about it when you initially, but all of your named heroes have 3 might, which is really good. So I don't know, you can do, even though most of them are on foot, you can do cheeky things with like comboing them, getting the heroic combats and stuff. If you get the war cry and the 6-inch banners. I've seen this list with 2 banners, and it's basically over the entire army. It's like a horde army that has a banner effect over the whole thing, which is pretty gross. All of this being said, I have played against this Legion twice, I think, with Théodred's Guard, so with Rohan, so they're getting the bonus, and I beat it both times. But the reason I did that is because I just didn't fight it in combat, because as soon as it gets into combat with the Rohan force, the Rohan just melts away. They just disappear. It's gross. I think I like it.
I think it's as mid as you can get, right?
Yeah. I maybe between Druadan and Defenders, is that kind of what we're feeling?
That's exactly where I'm thinking.
Yeah.
What about you, Richard?
100%. I like it.
Because it definitely has potential, but I don't know.
We actually forgot that there is an additional Legendary Legion in the back of the book, so we're tacking it onto this tier list. And
what are you talking about? We didn't forget. This is definitely the same day.
Totally.
I just quickly changed our clothes.
I know. Well, we all have to get ready to go out for dinner.
That's how good Helm's Guard is. We had to change our clothes before reviewing it.
It's at the back of the book, so it's fair that we forgot about it. But last but not least, we have Helm's Guard. And so I think out of the 3 of us, I played it, and I think Richard's played it a few times. What do you guys think?
Okay, the one time I've played against it, I played a Harad list, I think at 400 points, and Richard was running it, and he tabled me.
Yeah, I've played it at 400 a couple times, not just against you, and it's scary. It's you're playing a budget Elendil.
Yeah, but he's backed up by a bunch of fight 5 throwing spear fearless dudes in a little bubble of fun.
Having fight 5 in like 6 inches around him is amazing.
It's big, like you said, on having you guys a Royal Guard bodyguard around him. It's great. But just touching on the fight value thing, he is fight 5. Because he has that free point of might to heroic strike if he wants to, if he's going up against elves, he can just heroic strike against basic troops. And he'll still win the fight and kill 2 guys a turn, which is fine. That's great. If you're killing 2 elves a turn, especially at low points, you're going to do fine. You're going to win the game. I don't know. It is a weakness, but it's easily overcome with the amount of might that he has available to him.
I think it's the throwing spears. It's one of the legions where Rohan also has the throwing spears acting as regular spears as well. I think that's a bit of a theme where it takes foot Rohan to actual playable, if not competitive level. Without it, you always need an ally like Lothlorien or something. But when you can just support with throwing spears, I mean, it's just crazy versatile.
Yeah, I think what makes this different than other of the Rohan foot legions, like Théodred's Guard and Defenders of Helm's Deep, is that Helm Hammerhand is the only named hero, and that's also kind of like the downfall of the list, where as soon as you max out Helm's Warband, all you're left with are captains and King's Huntsmen, and They're fight 3, fight 4. They don't get the fight value buff from Helm, and it just doesn't scale well from there, right? That's like, it's just what you have in the 6-inch bubble that's buffed, and then after that, it's just generic heroes leading troops.
Do the captains get the fight value buff? I forget.
No, they don't.
No? I still think it's viable with a captain in there. Like up to 500-600 points, probably where you start to max out.
I brought him to a 600-point tournament, and I felt really like the captain didn't feel like he was there. He was worth his points. He was there to call heroic marches and heroic moves, and that was about it. The fight 4 is a huge weakness, because typically when you run Rohan captains, you're either in like Théodred's Legendary Legion or something like that, where you would get up to fight 5 when you charge. So here it just feels kind of underwhelming, and also just you don't have any other named heroes in comparison to other Rohan legions.
Yeah, I guess you're not getting the Riders of Rohan ignore bow limit too, right? So you can't. It's hard to build the all cavalry army that's good at skirmishing and good at fighting.
Yeah, and you don't really want that, because then you're giving up your spear bonus. But I think this is probably one of the most extreme legions. Like, there's not a lot of legions where it's like God mode at like 400 and under, but then like, yeah, like you said, even at 600, which I consider like still on the lower side, like Théodred's Guard still runs well. Even like the Dunland still runs well, but this legion, like, I don't know, even 500 is a little bit pushing it, I think.
So basically, as soon as you can't only take Helm and a warband, that's when it gets bad. Is that what you're saying?
I think maybe you can take like one captain, but then like if you're forced to like take anything else, then it's not good.
You know what I think? I think 400 points, it starts at S tier, and every 100 points you go up, it goes down 1 tier.
That's not a bad metric. I kind of like that.
So, does this mean we should put him smack down in the middle of B? What do you guys think?
I don't know. That feels kind of harsh. Ugh.
One day we should have a tier list of low point legendary legions. I think that might be more fair to extreme legions like this.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, but since we're going by like the average playability, that's kind of what the best we can do, right?
I think, yeah, if you played it at 800, like, I don't know. So we're saying at S at 400. Oh, so at 800 it becomes a meme tier.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's
you see that at an 800 point tournament, and you're just like, this guy is here for fun and fun only.
You're like, yeah, I'm gonna tie up Helm with 2 guys and then destroy everything else. Yeah, I guess that's fair.
I'm okay with a B.
Yeah.
Okay. Middle of B.
That
Perfectly balanced.
That puts it ahead of Druadan.
Yeah, I think that's fine, because midpoints, it's still playable, right? It's not like a really competitive list, but it could still win games depending on your opponent. All right. Okay, so to round out our list, starting in meme tier, we have Riders of Éomer and the Wolves of Isengard. Nothing in C tier this list, and in B we have Defenders of Helm's Deep being at the top of B, followed by the Army of Dunland, Helm's Guard, Pass of the Druadan, and Uglúk Scouts. In A we have Théodred's Guard, and in S we have Assault upon Helm's Deep. Let us know what you think of this tier list, and if there's any that you disagree with, we would also like to see how you would rank them. Please also remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel.